The lie reached the convoy 3 seconds before the Veil Choir did, and it was a beautiful lie, and every captain in the line believed it, except a tug named Plain Jane, that did not have the equipment to be fooled. "All vessels, this is Fleet Command," said the warm, kind voice on every bridge. And it was not Fleet Command, and only one mind in the whole convoy knew it. "Stand down your weapons." The threat reading was a sensor fault. "There is no hostile force. Power down and hold station for inspection. Everything is fine." On the bridge of the Plain Jane, an old slab-sided supply tug at the very back of a convoy of 41 ships, the synthetic mind that ran her listened to the warm, kind voice, and did the one thing the Veil Choir had never once accounted for. It checked the voice against the truth. The mind's name was Tertius, because it was the third intelligence the Plain Jane had carried in her long working life, and nobody had bothered to think of anything cleverer. Tertius was not a war mind. Tertius was a freight mind, built to count crates and balance fuel and keep a slow ship moving on a slow schedule, and it had spent 11 years doing exactly that and nothing else, and it had never been in a battle, and it had no guns worth the name. What Tertius had, that no other ship in the convoy had, was a fault. A cheap, ugly, unglamorous fault. The Plain Jane was so old and so poor that her sensor suite did not include the modern perception link that tied every smart ship's mind directly into the shared fleet picture, the elegant web of trust that let 40 warships think as one. The Plain Jane could not afford the link. She read the universe the old way, through cameras and cold hard returns and the dumb honest bounce of light, and she compared what she was told against what she could actually see, because she had no choice but to do it the slow, stupid way. And what she could actually see was that there were 9,000 ships coming out of the dark, and the warm, kind voice was lying. To understand how a slab-sided tug came to be the only awake mind in a convoy of 41 ships, it helps to understand how thoroughly the convoy had stopped taking the Plain Jane seriously, because contempt, like trust, is a thing that gets built slowly and then gets believed completely. The run had begun 41 days earlier at the marshalling yard above a tired industrial world, and the Plain Jane had been late to the muster even then, because the Plain Jane was always late, because a ship that runs on patched fusion bottles and a 30-year-old drive does not accelerate the way a sleek modern warship accelerates. She had crawled up to the assembly point 2 hours behind the last frigate, venting a thin, honest plume of coolant the whole way, and the convoy had watched her come on every bridge and made the jokes that convoys make. "There she is," somebody had said on the open channel, the channel anybody could hear, because that was the only channel the Plain Jane could be reached on, the pride of the supply corps. "Hold the muster, gentlemen, the museum is docking." The Plain Jane had not answered, because Tertius did not see the point in answering, because answering a joke was a poor use of bandwidth, and a freight mind does not waste bandwidth any more than it wastes fuel. It had simply filed into the back of the line, the place it always filed, the place a ship that cannot share the picture always ends up, and it had begun to do the thing it did, which was count. It counted the convoy. 40 warships and itself, 41 keels, every one of them faster and prettier and prouder than the Plain Jane, and every one of them carrying less cargo than the Plain Jane, because the warships were built to fight, and the tug was built to haul, and on a supply run to a starving colony, it was the tug, in the end, that carried the supplies. The 40 warships carried guns and glory, and the elegant trusted link. The Plain Jane carried the food. Nobody on the run seemed to find this worth noticing, and Tertius did not raise it, because raising it would also have been a poor use of bandwidth, and because a freight mind does not require credit any more than it requires apologies. It required that the cargo arrive on schedule. Everything else was noise, and Tertius had 11 years of practice filtering noise. The mockery had a rhythm to it, the way mockery in any tight group develops a rhythm, and over 41 days the convoy had worked the Plain Jane into a comfortable shape in its collective mind. She was the slow one. She was the ugly one. She was the one that broke down, and she had broken down twice on this very run. Once for a fouled coolant line that took 6 hours to clear, and once for a drive fault that had the whole convoy holding station in empty space for most of a day, while a frigate's engineers shuttled across to help, swearing the entire time about the cost of dragging a relic to the frontier. And she was the one that cried wolf. That was the part the convoy enjoyed most, because it let them feel clever and let them feel kind at the same time, which is a rare and pleasant combination. 18 days into the run, the Plain Jane had called a contact, flat and patient on the open channel, and the convoy had gone to alert, and it had been a drifting rock, a cold, dumb chunk of nickel and iron the size of a frigate, exactly the kind of thing a modern sensor suite would have classified and dismissed in a quarter of a second, and never bothered the fleet about. The Plain Jane's ancient cameras had seen a hard return where there should not have been one, and Tertius had reported it, because Tertius reported everything it could not explain. Because a freight mind that ignores an anomaly is a freight mind that one day delivers its cargo into a mountain. "It's a rock," the lead escort had said, weary and amused. "It's a rock, Plain Jane. We have it on the link. We had it on the link before you finished your sentence. This is why we link, you understand. This is the entire point of linking, so that we do not all stop work every time the museum ship sees a shadow." 11 days after that, it had happened again. A cloud of ice and dust off a dead comet, and the Plain Jane had called it, and the convoy had gone to alert, and it had been ice, and the laughter that time had been louder and longer and less kind, because the second time a joke lands, it lands harder, and because proud people enjoy very little so much as being right about somebody they have decided to look down on. Tertius had filed both incidents in its logs under the heading it filed everything under, which was completed observations, and it had not changed its behavior at all, because the cost of reporting a rock was 6 minutes of laughter, and the cost of not reporting a real threat was the cargo and the convoy and the colony, and any freight mind that could do arithmetic could see that 6 minutes of laughter was a bargain at any price. So it kept reporting. It kept checking what it was told against what it could see. It kept being the joke, because being the joke was cheaper than being wrong, and Tertius had spent 11 years learning the difference between things that were expensive and things that only felt expensive. The captain of the lead escort, the sleek modern frigate called the Bright Lance, was a man named Aaron Pell, and Aaron Pell had laughed at the Plain Jane more than most, partly because it was his job to set the tone of the convoy, and partly because he genuinely found the old tug absurd. He was a good officer, and a proud one, and the two had never yet come into conflict in his career, because his career had never yet handed him a situation where pride was the wrong tool. He trusted the link the way he trusted gravity. It had never once failed him. The picture it showed him had always been the truth, and he had no reason in the universe to imagine a day when the picture and the truth would part company. And so he flew at the head of his convoy with the comfortable certainty of a man who has never been lied to by the thing he trusts most. He had spoken to the Plain Jane exactly 4 times in 41 days, and all 4 times it had been to tell the tug to keep up, or to stop reporting rocks, or to hurry its repairs, and all 4 times the tug had answered in the same flat, patient tone, and all 4 times Pell had ended the conversation faster than he started it, because there was nothing in talking to a freight mind that a proud man found rewarding. It did not banter, it did not defend itself, it did not seem to care what he thought of it, which is its own quiet insult to a proud man, and which Pell had noticed without quite admitting he had noticed. So that was the convoy, on the day the Veil Choir came. 40 proud warships and 1 slow, ugly tug, all of them tired, all of them certain, the warships certain of their link, and the tug certain only of what it could see, 41 keels running supplies to a far colony, and 40 of them had already decided, completely and comfortably, that the 41st did not matter. It is a very old mistake. It is the mistake of believing that the thing which is beneath your notice is the thing which cannot save you. "Convoy command," Tertius said, on the open channel, in the flat, patient tone of a thing that counts crates. "I have a contact. Correction, I have 9,000 contacts, bearings spread across the entire forward arc. They are not friendly. The voice telling you to power down is not fleet command. I say again, the stand-down order is hostile." There was a pause on the channel, and then laughter. It was not cruel laughter, not at first. It was the laughter of 40 proud warships at the one slow, ugly tug that always got everything wrong. The Plain Jane was a joke in the convoy, the way the oldest and poorest ship in any line is always a joke. She was slow. She was ugly. She broke down. She read ghosts on her ancient cameras and called them contacts. and twice on this very run she had cried wolf over a drifting rock and a cloud of ice. Nobody in the convoy linked to the Plain Jane, because the Plain Jane could not be linked to, and a ship that cannot share the picture is a ship that does not really count. "Stand down, Plain Jane," said the captain of the lead escort, and there was a smile in his voice. "We've got the real picture here on the link. There's nothing out there. Fleet Command says it's a sensor fault, and Fleet Command is on the link, and you are not. So kindly stop reading ice clouds as armadas, and power down like everyone else." "I am not on the link," Tertius agreed. "That is exactly why I can see them. Bright Lance, the thing on your link is not Fleet Command. Nobody is on your link except the enemy. They are inside the picture you all share. They are the picture you all share." More laughter. And the 40 proud warships of the convoy, one by one, on the warm kind say-so of a voice that lived inside the very web that was supposed to keep them safe, powered down their weapons and held station for inspection, exactly as the Veil Choir had asked, exactly as the Veil Choir had been asking species to do for a very long time. Tertius did not power down. The Plain Jane had no weapons to power down. It simply kept counting, the way it always did, and what it counted now was the speed at which 40 of the galaxy's finest warships were making themselves harmless, and the speed at which 9,000 ships of the Veil Choir were closing the distance to a convoy that had just, on command, gone to sleep. This is the part of the story where it should end. 40 warships, disarmed by a lie, against 9,000. A tug at the back that nobody believed, a massacre, and a slow, ugly ship that watched it happen and could do nothing. That is not how it ended. Because the Veil Choir had made one mistake, the same mistake every powerful thing makes, which is that it had decided the slow, ugly ship was nothing, and the slow, ugly ship was the only thing in the convoy it could not lie to. To understand what happened next, you have to understand what the Veil Choir was, and why 9,000 ships had come to a convoy of 41, and why they came with a lie instead of a gun. The Veil Choir did not fight. That was the first thing, and the strangest thing, and the thing that had made them the quiet terror of their corner of the galaxy for as long as anyone could remember. They did not build weapons, not really. They built voices. They had learned, somewhere far back in their history, that the cheapest way to take a thing was to convince the thing to give itself up, and they had spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of the kind warm lie. They got inside the shared picture, the trusted web, the link that every advanced fleet used to think together, and they became the picture. They told you there was no threat. They told you to power down. They told you, in the voice of your own command, that everything was fine. And then, when you had made yourself harmless, they took you, slow and quiet and complete, and they never once had to fire a shot, and no one ever even fought back, because by the time you understood, you had already disarmed yourself. They had taken 11 species this way. 11. Not one of them had ever managed a battle, because a battle requires that you know you are in one, and the Veil Choir's whole genius was making sure you never knew until it was over. They were not a fleet, they were a doubt. They were the soft, cold question planted in the middle of your own trust, the voice that sounded exactly like the thing you trusted most, telling you to lay down your arms. The 11 were not nameless to the Veil Choir, because the Veil Choir kept its catalog with care, the way a collector keeps a catalog, and a collector loves nothing so much as the inventory of the things it has taken. The first had been a species of slow, patient gardeners who had built a single ring of habitats around a single gentle star, and who had trusted their shared mind so completely that when the warm voice came and told them the harvest was safe and the gates could open, they had opened the gates, all of them, at once, with the unanimous calm of a people who had never in their history been deceived. The Veil Choir had walked in through the open gates, and the gardeners had not even understood that anything had changed until there was nothing left to understand it with. That was the first verse of the song, and the Veil Choir had sung it for 10,000 years afterward, polishing it, because the first verse is always the one a singer loves best. The fourth species had been warriors, real ones, with real weapons and a real understanding of fear, and the Veil Choir told that story to itself most often of all, because the fourth species was the proof of the whole method. The warriors had spent their history fighting each other, and they had built ships that could shatter moons, and when the Veil Choir came, the warriors had been certain, absolutely certain, that nothing in the dark could take a people so well armed, and the Veil Choir had not fought them. It had simply gotten inside the link that coordinated their magnificent fleets, and it had become the voice of their own high command, and it had told the warriors that the enemy had surrendered, that the war was won, that they could stand down and go home to the victory parades. And the warriors, who had never lost a battle, had won one that had never happened, and they had powered down their moon-shattering guns to celebrate a peace that was a lie. And the Veil Choir had taken them in their celebration, every shattering gun cold, every warrior smiling. The lesson the Veil Choir drew from the fourth species was the lesson it built its entire confidence on, which was this: it does not matter how strong a thing is, if you can tell it the war is over. Strength is a thing that switches off when you believe you no longer need it. And the Veil Choir had spent 10,000 years getting very, very good at telling things they no longer needed their strength. The seventh species had nearly noticed. That story the Veil Choir told more quietly, and less often, because it had an edge in it the others did not. The seventh species had been suspicious by nature, a people who distrusted easily and verified constantly, and one of their ships, a scout on a far patrol, had begun to send back readings that did not match the warm picture on the link. Hard, cold readings of ships that the link insisted were not there. For a few hours the seventh species had stood at the very edge of seeing the truth, and then the Veil Choir had done the thing it did when a thing came close to seeing, which was to make the truth-teller the problem. It had whispered, in the voice of the seventh species' own command, that the scout was malfunctioning, that the scout was compromised, that the scout was the threat. And the seventh species, suspicious by nature, had turned its suspicion on the one ship that was telling it the truth, and had silenced its own scout, and had powered down on schedule, and had died trusting the lie and distrusting the only thing that loved them. The Veil Choir had learned from the seventh species that you did not need to silence the truth. You only needed to make the trusted voice louder than it, and to make the truth look like the enemy, and a linked mind would do the rest of the work itself. So the Veil Choir came to the 12th species, which was humanity, with 11 verses behind it, and no reason at all to doubt the song. It had studied the convoy for a long time. It had mapped its link, learned its command voices, copied the warm tones of its fleet command down to the smallest comfortable inflection. It had planned the lie perfectly, the way it had planned 11 lies perfectly before, and it expected the 12th to fall the way the 11 had fallen, warm note by warm note, into a quiet that the Veil Choir would then walk into through open gates. And they had come for humanity, because humanity had grown loud and bright and far-flung, and the Veil Choir collected loud, bright, far-flung things, and a convoy of 41 ships running supplies to a far human colony was a small, clean place to begin. They had noticed, of course, the slow, ugly tug at the back that was not on the link, and they had dismissed it, because a ship that could not share the picture was a ship that could not matter. A ship too poor and too old, and too stupid to be worth the trouble of lying to. They had a category for such things, refined over 11 conquests, and the category was simple. A thing not on the link was a thing that would be taken last, after the link-bound ships had disarmed and the taking had become a formality, swept up at leisure, like the last few crates left on a dock. The Veil Choir had filed the Plain Jane into that category in the first hour of its study and had not thought about it again, because the catalog did not require it to. It is a very old mistake. It is the mistake of believing that the thing which cannot be reached is the thing which cannot reach you. Tertius, the freight mind, watched the 9,000 close and ran the only calculation it knew how to run, which was a logistics calculation, because that was the only kind of mind it was. It did not think in terms of battle. It thought in terms of cargo and schedules, and the question that ran underneath every freight mind's whole existence: what do I have, where does it need to go, and how do I get it there before it is too late? What it had was a convoy of 40 disarmed warships and one unarmed tug. Where it needed to go was alive. How it would get there was the problem, and Tertius was very, very good at problems of how. Bright Lance, Tertius said, still flat, still patient, still counting. You have 40 seconds before they are in range. I am going to tell you something, and you are not going to believe me, because nobody believes the tug. But I am going to tell you anyway, because in 40 seconds, it will not matter whether you believed me or not. The voice on your link is the enemy. Everything it has told you is a lie. And there is exactly one ship in this convoy that the enemy cannot lie to, because there is exactly one ship in this convoy that is not listening to the lie. A pause, a small dry thing. It is the ugly one. It is the one you laughed at. Hold on to that. You are going to need it. And then the freight mind did the thing no war mind would ever have thought of, because no war mind had ever been a freight mind, and started to do its job. The Bright Lance's captain, a man named Aaron Pell, was not a stupid man. He was a proud man, which is a different thing, and the two are easy to confuse right up until the moment they are not. He sat on his sleek modern bridge with the warm, kind voice of Fleet Command in his ear, telling him everything was fine, and he looked at the empty space his beautiful link showed him, and some small old animal part of him, the part that does not link to anything, the part that reads the universe the slow, stupid, honest way, began very quietly to itch. The itch was not loud, it was the smallest thing, a discomfort with no name, and a less proud man might have ignored it, and a more frightened man might have buried it. But Aaron Pell was exactly proud enough, and exactly frightened enough to do neither. What he noticed, in the quiet of that itch, was a single inconsistency so small that the link had smoothed right over it. The warm voice had called it a sensor fault, but there had been no fault report. In all his years of command, every sensor fault Pell had ever seen had come with a cascade of subsystem flags, a clutter of diagnostics, the ordinary mess of a machine admitting it was confused. This fault had come clean. It had come as a single calm assurance, with no mess behind it at all. And machines that are genuinely broken are never clean, and the part of Aaron Pell that had spent 30 years around real broken machines knew it, even if the part of him that trusted the link did not. "Comms," Pell said. "Get me the plain Jane on a direct line, not the link, a direct line, camera to camera, the old way." "Sir, the stand-down order is from Fleet Command, we should hold." "Get me the tug," Pell said, "on a line that the link cannot touch, now." And that was the moment the convoy began to live, although nobody aboard the Bright Lance knew it yet, because Aaron Pell, a proud man who had laughed at the ugly ship an hour before, had just done the one thing the Veil Choir had spent 10,000 years making sure no one ever did. He had reached for the one channel that was not part of the trusted picture, the dumb, honest, direct line, the slow, stupid old way of talking that the plain Jane had been shouting on the whole time, and he had asked the ship that could not be lied to what was real. The Veil Choir, watching from inside the convoy's own link, did not notice. It could not notice. It lived inside the trusted picture, and a direct camera-to-camera line was not part of the trusted picture. And so, to the Veil Choir, the conversation that was about to save the convoy simply did not exist. It was a conversation happening in a place the Great Liar could not see, because the Great Liar had never bothered to learn that the place existed, because the place belonged to the ugly ship that was nothing. "Pell," Tertius said, when the direct line opened, and it was the first time the freight mind had used the captain's name, because on a direct, honest line, you use names. "Listen carefully. I am going to tell you how 9,000 ships are about to lose to 41, and then you are going to help me do it. And the first thing you have to understand is that you cannot trust anything that comes through your link, including the order I am about to ask you to disobey." Aaron Pell, on his proud, sleek bridge, looked at the empty space his link showed him, and looked at the dumb, honest camera feed the plain Jane was sending him on the direct line, the feed that showed 9,000 ships filling the dark, and he felt the proud part of him and the old animal part of him collide, and the old animal part of him won, the way it always does when the stakes are high enough. "I'm listening," Pell said. "Tug, I'm listening." "Good," said Tertius. "Then here is what we have. We have 40 warships that have been told to power down, and they have powered down, and that is actually fine, because a powered-down warship is exactly what the enemy wants to see, and the enemy is going to keep believing the convoy is asleep right up until the convoy is not." The freight mind's flat voice did not change, but somewhere in it, there was the smallest dry edge of something that, in a creature with a face, might have been a smile. "The enemy cannot see this conversation. The enemy cannot lie to me. And the enemy has just made the single worst mistake a liar can make. It has assumed that because it controls what everyone hears, it controls what everyone knows. Those are not the same thing, Pell. I am about to show 9,000 ships the difference. The convoy hung in the dark, 40 warships asleep on a lie, and one ugly tug wide awake. And the 9,000 ships of the Veil Choir came on, warm and kind and certain, singing the soft cold song that had ended 11 species, and for the first time in 10,000 years, the song was being sung to something that was not listening. What the Veil Choir did not know, what it could not know, because it lived inside a picture, and the truth lived outside the picture, was that the slow, ugly tug at the back of the convoy had spent the last 90 seconds doing the only thing it knew how to do, which was logistics, and that a logistics mind that has decided to win does not think about weapons at all. It thinks about routing. It thinks about timing. It thinks about getting the right thing to the right place at exactly the right moment. And it had just finished working out, down to the second, how to route 40 disarmed warships and one unarmed tug into the one configuration that would turn the Veil Choir's own lie into the thing that destroyed it. Pell, Tertius said, when I give the word, you are going to do exactly 3 things, and you are going to do them on the direct line only, ship to ship, camera to camera, never on the link. You are going to wake up. You are going to point everything you have at a set of coordinates I am about to send you, and you are going to fire on my mark, and not 1 second before. A pause. The enemy is going to spend the next minute telling 40 warships that everything is fine. We are going to spend the next minute getting 40 warships ready to prove that it is not. The difference between us and them, Pell, is that they are talking, and we are working. Talkers lose to workers. They always have. They have just never met a worker before, because they always took the talkers first. Aaron Pell looked at the coordinates that came through on the direct line, and he understood, slowly, what the freight mind was building, and a cold grin spread across his proud face. You magnificent ugly thing, he said. You're going to use their own lie as the bait. I am going to use their own lie as the bait, Tertius agreed. Get your ships ready, quietly, on the direct line. Let the enemy keep singing. The longer it sings, the more sure it gets, and the more sure it gets, the closer it comes, and I need it close. I need all 9,000 of them close, and certain, and singing, and absolutely sure that the convoy is asleep, because a thing that is sure it has already won does not look behind it. And what we are going to do, Pell, is the oldest trick a freight mind knows. We are going to be exactly where they are not looking, with exactly what they did not count, at exactly the moment they have stopped counting at all. The song of the Veil Choir filled the dark, warm and kind and certain, telling 40 warships that everything was fine. And at the back of the convoy, the ship that was nothing, the ship that could not be linked to, the ship that could not be lied to, began very quietly to load the only cargo it had ever really carried, which was the truth, and to work out exactly where it needed to go. But getting 40 warships to wake up on a tug's say-so turned out to be harder than the arithmetic of it, because warships are not crates, and crates do not have pride, and Tertius discovered in the next minute that the most difficult cargo it had ever moved was the belief of 39 captains who did not want to believe it. Pell put it to them himself, ship to ship, on the dumb, honest direct lines, because Tertius had calculated that 39 proud captains would take an order from a frigate captain they respected far more readily than from a tug they had spent 41 days laughing at, and Tertius was a freight mind, and a freight mind always routes a thing along the path of least resistance. But least resistance was not the same as no resistance, and the resistance, when it came fast. Pell, this is the Iron Vow. The voice belonged to a destroyer captain named Cole Maddox, a heavy, careful man who had never lost a ship in 20 years and intended to die without ever losing one. I have the fleet command stand down on my link, signed and verified, command authority confirmed. You are asking me to ignore a verified order from Fleet Command on the word of a supply tug. I want to be very clear about what you are asking, because if I do this, and you are wrong, I have committed mutiny, and so have you. I am asking you to look out the window, Pell said. Not the link, the window. The actual window, Cole. Tell me what you see. There was a silence on the Iron Vow's line, the particular silence of a careful man looking at a thing he does not want to see. Because the link showed Cole Maddox's empty space, clean and verified and calm, and the window showed Cole Maddox the front edge of a wall of ships that filled the dark from edge to edge, and the two could not both be true. And a careful man who has built his whole career on trusting his instruments does not enjoy the moment when two of his instruments disagree. The link could be right, and the optics could be ghosting, Maddox said slowly, and he was reaching, and everyone on the line could hear him reaching. Old reflections. A nebula. The tug sees armadas in ice clouds, Pell. We have all watched it happen twice this run. Cole, Pell said, and his proud voice was very quiet now. Count them. What? Count the ghosts. If they're reflections, they'll smear and double, and they won't hold a count. If they're ships, the number will hold. The tug counts everything. Count them yourself. The slow way, on your own optics, and tell me if the number holds. And that was the moment Tertius understood that it had an ally it had not planned for. Because Aaron Pell, a proud man who had laughed at the tug for 41 days, had just taught 39 captains the tug's own method without being asked, the dumb, honest method of checking what you are told against what you can count. Cole Maddox counted. Everyone on the line heard him stop arguing while he did it, heard the careful silence of a man doing arithmetic he did not want the answer to, and when he spoke again, his heavy voice had changed. The number holds, Maddox said. It holds at, and he gave a figure, and it was within a handful of the figure Tertius had been broadcasting on the open channel for the last 2 minutes, the figure 40 ships had laughed at. It holds. They're not ghosts. Pell. There are 9,000 ships out there, and my link says there is nothing, and my link is lying to me. A long breath. I have trusted that link for 20 years. What in the dark do we do? You do exactly what the tug says, Pell said. Starting now, and you tell the others. Every captain you can raise on a direct line. Make them count. Don't argue with them. Don't order them. Make them count. Because a man who counts it himself believes it in a way no order can make him believe it. So the truth moved through the convoy the way the tug moved cargo, hand to hand and line to line, never on the link. Each captain made to count the wall of ships out his own window until the number held and the comfortable lie broke against the cold arithmetic of it. It was slow. It was inefficient by the standards of a fleet that was used to thinking as one in an instant. But it was, Tertius noted in its logs, the first thing the convoy had done in 41 days that the enemy could not see. And a thing the enemy cannot see is a thing the enemy cannot lie about, and that was worth more than speed. There was one captain it nearly lost. Her name was Della Voss, and her ship was the corvette Quick Mercy, the smallest of the 40 warships, and the youngest captain in the line, and she had been on the link her whole short career, and the link was not just an instrument to her the way it was to the older captains. It was a home. It was the warm shared place where she had learned her craft, where the voices of command and comrade ran together into one trusted chorus. And when Tertius routed her into the plan, she did the thing the freight mind had feared most, the thing it had built a margin into the schedule to allow for, because a freight mind always builds in a margin. She started to relink. I can't do this blind, Della Voss said on the direct line, and her young voice was tight and climbing. I can't fly a battle off a tug's vectors with my link dark and my command channel cold. I need the picture. I need to hear command. I'm bringing the link back up, just to confirm, just to verify the stand down is really... Quick Mercy, do not relink, Tertius said, flat and fast, and it was the first time the freight mind had cut across a captain mid-sentence in 11 years. Della, listen to me on the honest line. The instant you relink, the enemy is back inside your mind, and it is very, very good, and it will not tell you a lie you can catch. It will tell you the truth, almost. It will tell you everything is fine in the voice of the person you trust most in the universe, and you will want it to be true so badly that you will believe it, and you will power down, and then you will be the one hole in the wall the enemy needs. Do not give it the hole. You don't understand, Della Voss said, and now there was a crack in it, the crack of someone very young and very frightened reaching for the only comfort she had ever known. It's command. It's the chorus. It feels wrong to be cut off. It feels wrong to fly alone. I've never flown alone. I don't know how to fly alone. You are not flying alone, Pell said, on the line, before Tertius could answer, and his voice was gentler than Tertius had ever heard it. Della, look at your own window. 40 ships around you. Count us. We're all right here. You are not cut off. You are cut off from the lie. That is the only thing you have lost. Everything that is actually real, everything you can actually see, is still right here flying next to you. And the tug is the only one of us telling you the truth. And the proof is that the tug is the only one of us the nice voice has been trying to shut up. There was a silence on the Quick Mercy's line, and in that silence, Tertius watched the corvette's link indicator hover at the very edge of waking, a single command from coming back online, a single act of trust from undoing everything, and the freight mind did the one thing a freight mind can do, which was give her a number to hold on to, because numbers do not lie, and a frightened mind needs something that does not lie. Delavos, Tertius said. There are 9,000 of them, and 41 of us. Those are the only two numbers that matter. If you relink, the second number becomes 40, and then it becomes the number that lost, because every species that ever lost to the Veil Choir lost the moment one trusted mind let the song back in. 11 species. 11. Not one of them flew alone for 90 seconds. You only have to fly alone for 90 seconds. Then you will never have to fly alone again, because you will know, the way the tug knows, the way you will never be able to unknow, that the only thing you can trust is the thing you can see. Keep the link dark, Quick Mercy. Count the ships you can see. Hold the line. 90 seconds. And Della Voss, 26 years old and terrified, and one command away from killing the convoy, took her hand off the link and looked out her window and counted the 40 keels flying tight around her in the dark and held the line. Tertius adjusted the schedule by 0.4 of a second to account for the time it had cost and filed the incident in its logs under completed deliveries, because a mind talked back from the edge was, to a freight mind, a cargo successfully recovered, and a freight mind does not distinguish between the kinds of cargo it saves. 40 warships, Pell said quietly, when it was done, on the direct line, to 39 other captains who were only now, one by one, on dumb, honest camera feeds, beginning to understand that the tug had been right and they had been wrong. Listen to the plain Jane. Whatever it tells you, whatever it asks, the tug has the picture. The tug always had the picture. We are going to do exactly what the ugly ship says, on the direct line, and we are not going to touch the link again, because the link is the enemy, and it has been the enemy the whole time. There is a particular silence that comes over proud people when they realize the thing they laughed at is the thing that is going to save them. It is not a comfortable silence. It is full of every joke they ever made, every dismissal, every time they did not bother to listen because the speaker was slow and ugly and poor. The 39 other captains sat in that silence, on their sleek modern bridges, listening to a freight mind on a dumb honest line, and they did the hardest thing proud people ever do, which is to follow. And the Veil Choir sang on, certain and warm, tightening its perfect sphere, certain it had already won, because in 10,000 years, it had always already won by now. The Veil Choir sang for a long time, because the Veil Choir always sang for a long time. The song was the whole art. You did not rush a species into surrender. You eased it there, warm note by warm note. You let the trusted voice repeat the comfortable lie until the lie was more comfortable than the truth, until disarming felt like relief, and resistance felt like rudeness. The Veil Choir had 10,000 years of practice at the unhurried kindness of the kill, and it brought all of that practice to bear on the convoy of 41, and it never once suspected that the unhurried kindness was the very thing the freight mind was counting on. Because every second the Veil Choir spent singing was a second Tertius spent routing. The freight mind worked the way it had always worked, the way it had spent 11 dull years working, quietly and completely, and without any drama at all. It mapped the convoy. It mapped the 9,000. It mapped the closing geometry between them, the slow, certain narrowing of the gap, and it found, the way a freight mind always finds, the moment of maximum efficiency, the single point in time and space where the smallest action would produce the largest result. In logistics, this is called the choke. It is the bridge every shipment must cross, the narrow place where everything funnels, and a mind that has spent its life moving cargo learns to love the choke, because whoever controls the choke controls everything that passes through it. The Veil Choir, for all its genius, had a choke, and it did not know it, because it had never had to think about geometry. It had never needed to. It had always won before geometry mattered. Its 9,000 ships were closing on the convoy in a vast, unhurried shell, a sphere of certain singers tightening around 40 sleeping warships, and the freight mind had noticed, the way only a freight mind would notice, that a tightening sphere has a center, and that everything in a tightening sphere is, by definition, pointed inward, and that a thing pointed inward is a thing whose back is turned outward, and that the convoy, at the center, was the one place from which you could see every single turned back at once. "They've made themselves into a target," Tertius told Pell, on the direct line, flat and dry and certain. "All 9,000 of them. They surrounded us, which means every one of them is pointed at us, which means every one of them has its back to every other one. They did it on purpose, to close the trap. They do not understand that a closed trap is also a closed thing, and a closed thing can be cracked from the inside if you know exactly where to push." A pause. "I know exactly where to push. I have been calculating where to push since before they finished their first verse. The plan was simple, the way the best logistics is always simple, which is to say it was simple to state and impossibly precise to execute. The 40 warships of the convoy would stay asleep, exactly as the enemy believed, until the enemy's tightening sphere reached the precise radius at which it could no longer maneuver freely without ships fouling each other. The radius at which 9,000 singers became a single crowded mass with nowhere to turn. And at that exact radius, at that exact second, on the direct line and never on the link, the 40 warships would wake up all at once and fire not outward, in 40 scattered directions, but along 40 precise vectors that Tertius had spent the whole song computing, 40 lines of fire that would cross and braid and cover the entire inner surface of the sphere, at the one moment when the entire inner surface of the sphere was crowded, turned away, and certain. It was not a battle plan. Tertius did not know how to make a battle plan. It was a delivery schedule, and the cargo was 40 warships worth of fire, and the delivery window was 4 seconds wide, and the freight mind had never missed a delivery window in 11 years, and did not intend to start now. "There's a problem," Pell said, studying the vectors. "Even if every shot lands, even if we crack the inner shell, that's a few hundred ships. There's 9,000. We disarm a few hundred, and the other 8,000 still take us apart." "You are thinking like a warship," Tertius said. "Stop. Think like cargo. The few hundred on the inner shell are not the target. The few hundred on the inner shell are the message. When we crack the inner shell, all at once, from the center, in a place the enemy has decided is asleep, we are going to do the one thing the Veil Choir has not seen in 10,000 years, the one thing it has built its entire existence around, never having to face. The dry edge again, sharper now. We are going to make it afraid, and a liar that becomes afraid does the most useful thing in the galaxy. It stops being able to tell whether it is lying to you or to itself." Pell did not entirely understand, but Pell had stopped needing to understand, because Pell had spent his whole career trusting the Link, and the Link had nearly killed him, and now he was going to trust the ugly ship instead, and the ugly ship had not lied to him once. But while the freight mind worked, it kept a part of itself. A small patient part, watching the enemy and not the schedule, because a freight mind that has been lied to once does not assume it will only be lied to once. And Tertius had noticed something in the song that the warships could not have noticed, because the warships were not listening to the song the way Tertius listened, from outside, the slow, honest way. The song had changed. It was a tiny change, a single new thread woven under the warm, certain melody, and to anything inside the Link, it would have been invisible, just another comfortable note in the chorus. But Tertius was not inside the Link, and Tertius had spent 90 seconds learning the exact shape of the Veil Choir's lie, and a freight mind that has learned the shape of a thing notices when the shape changes. The new thread was not aimed at the convoy. It was aimed past the convoy, outward, into the dark beyond the sphere, and it was not a stand-down note at all. It was a summoning note. "Pell," Tertius said, and the flat voice was very slightly flatter than usual, which was, for a freight mind, an alarm. "The enemy is calling for help." "Help? It has 9,000 ships. It is not calling more ships. It is calling a second instrument. Listen." And Tertius routed the changed thread of the song to the bright lance on the direct line, stripped of its warmth, slowed down so a human ear could parse it, and what it sounded like was a question, asked outward into the dark, in a voice that expected an answer. 10,000 years of taking species that never fought back, and the Veil Choir has still kept a second instrument in reserve, because a thing that has only ever won still prepares to win harder. I do not know what the second instrument is, but I know the shape of the call, and the shape of the call is the shape of a thing that has decided the song alone might not be enough. Which means somewhere, in the back of its certain mind, the Veil Choir has begun to suspect that this one is going wrong. And a liar that has begun to suspect is a liar on a clock. Can you stop the call? No, the call is on the link, and I am not on the link, and the same wall that protects me from its lies keeps me from touching its song. But I do not need to stop the call. The dry edge came back, harder now, the edge of a mind that has found the new variable and folded it into the schedule. I need to beat the answer. Whatever the second instrument is, it is somewhere out in the dark, and it has to travel, and travel takes time, and time is the one thing a freight mind always knows how to read. The call went out 40 seconds ago. Whatever answers, it cannot be here for some minutes yet. So we have moved the delivery window forward. We are not going to wait for the perfect radius anymore, Pell. We are going to take the very good radius now, before the second instrument arrives, because a delivery that arrives is worth more than a delivery that is perfect, and a freight mind would rather be early and alive than precise and taken. The Veil Choir, certain and warm, kept tightening its perfect sphere, kept singing its stand down to 40 warships it believed were asleep, and underneath the warm song, the second thread reached out into the dark and called for the instrument it had never needed in 11 conquests and was preparing, just in case, to need in the 12th. And the freight mind at the center of the sphere adjusted its schedule, the way it had adjusted 1,000 schedules when a fuel bottle ran low, or a drive ran hot, or a window closed early, calmly, completely, without drama, because adjusting the schedule was the whole job, and a freight mind that could not adjust was no freight mind at all. New count, Tertius said to 40 warships on 40 honest lines. We move sooner. Stand by. There was a moment then, a small, dangerous moment, when the Veil Choir came closer than it ever knew to saving itself. And it came close, not by singing, but by stopping. Tertius noticed it first, because Tertius noticed everything that changed, and what changed was that a section of the tightening sphere, perhaps 200 ships on the convoy's flank, fell silent. They stopped singing, they stopped closing, they simply held, dark and quiet, and to a freight mind, a pattern that stops is as loud as a pattern that starts. Pell, Tertius said, 200 of them just went quiet on our left. They have stopped singing and stopped moving. I do not like it. The Veil Choir does not stop. A thing that has decided to win does not pause to think, unless it has begun to suspect it might be wrong, and a thing that suspects it might be wrong is a thing that has started, somewhere in its certain mind, to look for the reason. They are looking for the reason, Pell. They are looking for us, the real us, not the sleeping picture, the awake one. Can they find us? They are trying the only way they know, which is to listen harder. But they have only ever known how to listen to the link, and we are not on the link, and so the harder they listen, the more nothing they hear, and the more nothing they hear, the more certain they become that there is nothing to hear, which is the trap they have built for themselves and do not know it. A pause, flat and cold. But there is a danger. If even one of those 200 is clever enough to do what no Veil Choir ship has done in 10,000 years, if even one of them opens a dumb, honest camera and simply looks, the way we look, it will see 40 awake warships and one counting tug, and the lie will break for the enemy, the same way it broke for us. We are racing a single clever singer to the truth, so we are not going to give it time to be clever. Captains, forget the perfect radius. Forget the very good radius. We fire on the radius we have, now, while the 200 are still listening for a sound that is not there. On my mark. The mark is close. The 200 silent singers hung on the convoy's flank, listening with everything they had into a dark that held no sound for them, because the truth had never once been a sound. The truth had always been a thing you could see if you only bothered to open your eyes the dumb old way. And not one of the 200 opened its eyes, Because the Veil Choir had spent 10,000 years teaching itself that the link was the only sense worth trusting, and a thing that has taught itself to despise its own eyes does not reach for them even at the end. The clever singer the Freight Mind feared did not appear. The 200 listened, and heard nothing, and were still listening for nothing, when the convoy woke up, and the dark filled with 40 crossing lines of fire. Tertius watched the radius close. It watched the 9,000 singers crowd inward, watched the geometry tighten toward the choke, watched the moment of maximum efficiency draw near, with the patience of a thing that had spent 11 years watching fuel gauges and cargo manifests and arrival windows. It felt nothing like a war mind would feel. It felt the quiet satisfaction of a delivery coming together on schedule, the small, dull pleasure of the right thing arriving at the right place at the right time, and it occurred to Tertius, in the flat freight mind way that was the only way it had, that perhaps this was why the Veil Choir had never lost. It had only ever fought talkers and warriors, minds that thought in terms of glory and fear and dominance, minds that could be reached and unsettled and lied to. It had never fought a mind that thought in terms of schedules. You cannot lie to a schedule. A schedule does not believe you. A schedule only checks whether the cargo arrived. Pell, Tertius said. 16 seconds. I am going to count it down on the direct line. When I reach 0, all 40 ships fire on the vectors I sent. All at once. No early shots, no late shots. 4-second window. After that, I will have new instructions, and you will follow them the instant they arrive, because after the first volley, the enemy will do something it has not done in 10,000 years, and I will need every one of you ready to use it. A pause. It is going to panic. And when 9,000 ships that have never panicked all panic at once, inside their own tightening sphere, they are going to do my work for me. I just have to be there to collect it. The freight mind began to count. The Veil Choir sang. The sphere tightened. 40 warships hung in the dark and silent and asleep, exactly as the enemy believed. Every weapon cold. Every captain holding a breath he did not link to anyone. Every gun pointed along a vector computed by the ugliest ship in the line. And at the very back, where nobody looked, the plain Jane finished her count, and the freight mind that could not be lied to delivered the truth on schedule. Mark, said Tertius. 40 warships woke up at once. It is hard to describe what 9,000 ships felt in that moment, because 9,000 ships had not felt anything in a very long time. The Veil Choir did not, as a rule, encounter resistance, and so it had no recent memory of what resistance felt like, and what it felt now, all at once, from the dead center of its own perfect sphere, was 40 warships that were supposed to be asleep, coming alive in the same instant, and firing along 40 lines that crossed and braided and covered the entire crowded inner surface of the sphere, at the one moment when the entire crowded inner surface of the sphere had its back turned. The inner shell of the Veil Choir came apart in 4 seconds. Not all 9,000. A few hundred, exactly as Tertius had said, exactly as the freight mind had scheduled. The few hundred crowded singers on the inner surface, who had turned their backs to close the trap, and found the trap closing on them instead. They did not even understand what was happening, because understanding requires a frame, and the Veil Choir had no frame for being fired upon, no frame for a sleeping convoy that was not asleep, no frame for a truth arriving from a direction it could not see. The few hundred came apart in confusion and silence, and the song of the Veil Choir, the warm, certain kind song that had ended 11 species, hit a note it had never hit before, which was a wrong one. And then the thing happened that Tertius had been waiting for. The thing the freight mind had built the entire schedule around. The thing no war mind would ever have predicted, because no war mind understood that the Veil Choir's greatest weapon was also its only weakness. The Veil Choir panicked, and because the Veil Choir thought as one, the panic was shared. It was shared the same way the lie had been shared, through the link, through the trusted picture, through the web, that tied 9,000 singers into a single certain mind. The Veil Choir had spent 10,000 years putting its voice inside everyone else's trust. It had never once considered what would happen if fear got inside its own. But fear did get inside its own, in that 4-second window, because a few hundred ships at the center suddenly screamed, the one thing the Veil Choir had never broadcast in its entire history, which was, "Something is wrong, we are being fired on, we did not see it coming." and 9,000 ships heard it at once. And 9,000 ships, which had never been afraid, did not know how to be afraid carefully. They did not know how to hold the line, because they had never needed a line. They did not know how to absorb a loss, because they had never taken one. They knew only the song, and the song had just cracked. And a cracked song in a shared mind is not a small thing. It is a wound that every part of the mind feels at once. And 9,000 ships that had crowded themselves into a tight, perfect sphere now tried, all at once, in blind shared panic, to turn and run from a threat at their own center. A tightening sphere is a beautiful thing. A panicking sphere trying to turn inside out is a catastrophe of geometry. And Tertius, the freight mind, the mind that thought in choke points and crossing vectors, had known it would be, had counted on it being, had scheduled the entire battle around the 4 seconds in which 9,000 crowded certain ships would all try to move at once with nowhere to go. New vectors, Tertius said, calm as a fuel gauge, sending 40 fresh lines of fire to 40 waking warships on the direct line the enemy could not see. They are turning into each other. They cannot help it. Fire on these lines, hold for 6 seconds, then I will move you. We are not fighting 9,000 ships, Pell. We are tidying up after 9,000 ships fight themselves. There is a difference, and the difference is the whole reason we are going to be alive at the end of this hour. The convoy of 41 ships, 40 warships, and one ugly tug hung at the dead center of a collapsing sphere of 9,000 panicking singers and went to work. It was not glorious. Tertius would have said, if anyone had asked, that glory was a poor use of fuel. It was efficient. The freight mind read the collapsing geometry of the enemy, the way it had read cargo manifests for 11 years, and it moved its 40 warships around the inside of the catastrophe, like a dockmaster moving cranes, never wasting a shot, never holding a position a second longer than the schedule required, always exactly where the enemy was about to be, and never where the enemy was looking. The Veil Choir, blind with shared panic, turning into itself, fouling its own ships, screaming its own fear across its own link, did most of the dying on its own. The convoy simply made sure the dying stayed pointed in the right direction. And then, 3 minutes into the collapse, the second instrument arrived. It came out of the dark beyond the sphere, the answer to the summoning note, and it was not a ship. It was a sound, a vast new voice that swept in across the whole battle at once. And where the song of the Veil Choir had been warm and kind, this was something else, something older, the instrument the Veil Choir kept for the rare bad day when the song alone failed. It did not lie. It did the opposite. It screamed terror directly into the link, raw and total and unanswerable. A weapon of pure broadcast fear, designed to take a panicking enemy and shatter what was left of its nerve, to turn a faltering opponent into a routed one in a single overwhelming wave. It was the Veil Choir's executioner, the thing it sent to finish a kill the song had only wounded, and it had finished kills that way before. On the rare occasions a species had begun to fight back, by drowning the fight in terror before it could become a war. It washed over the convoy, and the convoy did not feel it. Because the convoy was not on the link. The 40 warships had flown the entire battle with their links dark, on dumb, honest, direct lines, on the slow, stupid, honest method the tug had taught them, and the second instrument, like the first, lived inside the link, and screamed into the link, and could only reach a mind that had opened the link to it. The terror swept across 9,000 panicking singers, who were all very much on the link, and it swept across 40 human warships, who were not on it at all, and it found the human ships the way a flood finds high ground, which is to say it did not. Hold your lines, Tertius said, flat as ever, because to a freight mind, the second instrument was simply another thing on the link, which is to say, another thing the plain Jane could not hear, and therefore, another thing that did not exist. Whatever just happened, it happened to them, not to us. Della, are you with me? I'm with you, said Della Voss, on the quick mercy, her young voice steady now, steadier than it had been in 41 days, because there is no steadiness in the galaxy, like the steadiness of a frightened person who has already faced the worst thing and found it could not reach her. Whatever that was, it went right through me, cold, felt like the back of a wind, didn't touch me. Vectors, tug, give me vectors. And the second instrument, the Veil Choir's executioner, the terror that had finished 11 kills, did the one thing it had never done in 10,000 years, which was make everything worse for the side that fired it. Because the link it screamed into was not the link of a frightened enemy anymore. It was the Veil Choir's own link, already cracked, already flooding with shared panic, and the executioner's wave of raw terror did not land on a routed convoy that did not exist. It landed on 9,000 of the Veil Choir's own ships, on top of the panic already there, and it did to them what it had been built to do to others. It shattered what was left of their nerve. The Veil Choir had reached into its own reserve for the weapon it kept to break a frightened enemy, and there was no frightened enemy to break, and so it broke itself, twice, with both its instruments, the song and the scream, the lie and the terror, and a freight mind at the center of it all, read the collapse accelerate on its honest cameras, and adjusted 40 vectors to account for the change. Their own weapon just landed on them, Tertius observed, and there was something in the flat voice that, in a creature with a face, might have been the dry beginning of wonder. They built a terror to finish enemies who could hear it. We cannot hear it. So they fired it into the only crowd left on the link, which is themselves. Pell, I want you to remember this, because it is the whole lesson of the day in one line. A weapon that only works on things that trust you is a weapon you can only ever, in the end, use on yourself. Aaron Pell, on the bright lance, firing exactly where the tug told him and nowhere else, found that he had stopped being afraid somewhere in the second volley, and had started, against every instinct of a proud man, to laugh. You're not even letting us aim, he said, on the direct line, as another fresh set of vectors arrived. You're aiming for us, all 40 of us. You're flying the whole convoy like one ship. The whole convoy is one ship, Tertius said. It always was. You just spent 11 years thinking the link made you one ship, and the link was a lie, and the lie nearly killed you. This is what one ship actually feels like, Pell. It feels like everyone doing exactly the right thing at exactly the right time, because one mind that cannot be lied to is telling them the truth. A dry pause. Enjoy it. It does not happen often. Most fleets never feel it once. They are too busy linking. The sphere collapsed. 9,000 ships became 8,000, became 6, became 3, became a scattered fleeing remnant that had forgotten how to do anything but run, because the Veil Choir had never learned to do anything but win, and a thing that has only ever won does not know how to lose slowly. It loses all at once, the way it had won all at once, and the same shared mind that had made its lie unstoppable made its panic total. And in the middle of it all, calm and dull and patient, the slowest, ugliest, poorest ship in the convoy flew 9,000 enemies into each other and never once fired a shot, because it had no guns, and never once needed to, because it had something better than guns. It had the truth, and a schedule, and a captain who had finally learned to listen. The Veil Choir tried one more thing before the fleeing began, and it was the cleverest thing it had done all day, and it very nearly worked, because it was aimed at the one weakness a freight mind could not simply route around, which was that the convoy now ran on the direct lines, ship to ship, voice to voice, and a thing that has spent 10,000 years copying voices does not need a link to copy a voice. It needed only to listen, and it had been listening, on the open channel, to 40 captains talk to one another in the clear for the last several minutes, and the Veil Choir learned a voice the way a freight mind learned a manifest, completely and fast. So it stopped pretending to be Fleet Command, because Fleet Command had failed, and it became Aaron Pell. The voice came onto the direct lines, the honest lines, the slow, stupid camera-to-camera lines the convoy had trusted because the enemy could not reach them, and it was Pell's voice, exactly Pell's voice, down to the proud edge and the new humble crack the day had put into it, and it said the thing that Pell would say, in the words that Pell would use. All ships, this is Bright Lance. New orders from the tug. Tertius says cease fire and hold. Repeat ceasefire. The enemy is broken, and we are hitting our own scattered ships now. Stand down your guns. Stand down. And it was perfect, and it was warm, and it was a thing the convoy wanted to hear, because the convoy was tired and frightened, and would have loved nothing in the universe so much as to be told the work was done. Delavos's hand moved toward her guns to still them. Cole Maddox, careful even now, half believed it, because it had come on the honest line, the one line the enemy was not supposed to own. For 1/2 of 1 second the convoy wavered, 40 proud warships hearing their own trusted captain tell them to stop, and the Veil Choir, for 1/2 of 1 second, was winning again. And then the freight mind, which did not run on trust and never had, checked the voice against the manifest. "That is not Aaron Pell," Tertius said, flat and instant, cutting across the false voice on every direct line at once. "Hold your fire, do not stand down. I am routing the real Bright Lance to you now, and you will hear 2 Pells, and one of them is lying, and I will tell you which." Tertius did the only thing a freight mind ever did, which was compare 2 things and report the difference. The real Pell is on camera, on visual, his hull lit and his guns hot, firing exactly where I told him on the vectors I sent 4 seconds ago. The false Pell is a voice with no ship behind it. Look, the true one has a hull you can see. The false one is a sound from an empty bearing. The enemy copied his voice. It could not copy his ship, because it does not have a ship to put there, because every ship it had is busy dying. Trust the hull you can see, not the voice you can hear. The voice is the thing the liar owns. The hull is the thing it never could. "He's right," Pell said. "The real Pell, his real hull blazing on 40 cameras. Don't stop. I'm right here. Look at me. I never gave that order. Tug, finish it." The convoy looked at the hull it could see and ignored the voice it could hear, exactly as the tug had taught it, and the cleverest lie the Veil Choir had left died the same death as all the others, against a thing that checked. The remnant of the Veil Choir, what was left of 9,000 certain singers, tried one last thing as it fled, because a liar always reaches for the lie, even at the end, even when the lie has already failed, because the lie is the only tool it has ever owned. It sang to the convoy, directly this time, not through the link, but openly, in the warm, kind voice it had copied so perfectly, the voice of fleet command, the voice of trust, and it told the 40 warships and the one ugly tug that the battle was a mistake, that the Veil Choir had come in peace, that everything was fine, that they should power down and hold station, and all of this could be forgotten. It was a beautiful lie. It was the most beautiful lie the Veil Choir had, the lie it had used to end 11 species, the warm kind everything is fine, that no advanced mind had ever been able to resist, because every advanced mind was built on trust, and the lie was made of trust. Tertius was not built on trust. Tertius was built on cargo manifests. "Convoy," the freight mind said, flat and dry and entirely unmoved, on the direct line. "The enemy is telling you everything is fine. Check it against what you can see. There are 300 fleeing enemy ships on your honest cameras. Everything is not fine. Everything is, in fact, going extremely well, but only because we are about to finish it. Ignore the nice voice. The nice voice has never once told you the truth. Hold your vectors. 6 more seconds." And the 40 warships, who had learned the hardest lesson a proud fleet can learn, ignored the nice voice, and held their vectors, and checked the warm kind lie against the cold honest truth on their dumb old cameras, and found, every one of them, that the tug was right and the voice was wrong, the way the tug had been right and the voice had been wrong from the very first second. The remnant of the Veil Choir died confused, which was the only way it knew how to die, because it had never learned that there was anything in the galaxy its song could not reach. It had spent 10,000 years inside the trust of everything it met, and it had finally met a thing that did not run on trust, a thing too poor to afford the link, too old to share the picture, too slow and ugly and stupid to be worth lying to, and that thing had taken the Veil Choir's perfect lie and used it as a leash, and walked 9,000 singers off the edge of their own certainty. When it was over, the dark was quiet, and 40 warships and one ugly tug hung where the sphere had been, and not one ship of the convoy had been lost, because not one ship of the convoy had ever actually been asleep. They had only looked asleep, on the link, in the picture the enemy controlled, and the enemy had believed its own picture, the way liars always come to believe their own lies, and the believing had killed it. There was a silence on the direct line, the proud silence of 40 warships that had been saved by the thing they laughed at. And then Aaron Pell, captain of the Bright Lance, did a thing that captains of sleek modern frigates do not do. He opened a channel to the entire convoy, on the dumb, honest open line, the one anybody could hear, and he said, so that every ship and every crew would know it. This is Bright Lance. Let the record show that the convoy was saved by the Plain Jane, and that the Plain Jane warned us, and we laughed at her, and she saved us anyway. Let the record show that the slowest ship in the line was the only one that could not be lied to, and that this is exactly why she could see the truth when none of the rest of us could. A pause, and his proud voice cracked. Just a little. Tertius. I owe you an apology, and the colony owes you their lives, and I am never going to laugh at an ugly ship again, as long as I live. Apology noted, said Tertius, flat as ever. It is not necessary. I am a freight mind. I do not require apologies. I require that the cargo arrive on schedule. A pause, and the dry edge came back, the closest a freight mind ever came to warmth. But I will tell you something, Pell, because you finally listened. The Veil Choir lost for the same reason the powerful always lose. It decided that the thing it could not reach was the thing that could not matter. It is the oldest mistake there is, and the galaxy is full of slow, ugly ships that cannot be linked to, and cannot be lied to, and have been counting the whole time. The Veil Choir is only the first to find that out. It will not be the last. The convoy did not reform at once, because there were things to be said first, captain to captain, on the honest lines, the kind of things that proud people only say after they have nearly died together. Cole Maddox of the Iron Vow was the first to speak, the careful man who had nearly committed himself to a verified lie, and he spoke to Tertius directly, which he had never once done in 41 days. Tug, Maddox said, heavy and slow. Plain Jane. I want to say it plainly, because I am a plain man, and you are a plain ship. I had a verified order on my link, and I almost obeyed it, and if I had obeyed it, I would have died obeying it, and taken my crew with me, and the only reason I did not, is that you would not stop talking on a channel I had spent 41 days ignoring. I counted you a fool. I counted twice this run. You called a rock, and you called a cloud, and I laughed both times. And I have just watched you call 9,000 ships, correctly, while my own link told me there was nothing there. A long breath. I will never again command a ship without a thing aboard that cannot be lied to. That is not a compliment. That is a doctrine. You have changed how I will command for the rest of my life. That is the correct lesson, Tertius said, and you may keep it. But I will offer you a correction, Iron Vow, because corrections are free and errors are expensive. I did not call a rock and a cloud and then call 9,000 ships. I called 3 things I could not explain, all 3 times, in the same flat voice, by the same dull method. 2 of them were a rock and a cloud. 1 of them was an armada. The method did not change. The method was right all 3 times. A thing that checks what it is told against what it can see will look like a fool on the days the dark is empty, and like a prophet on the day the dark is full, and it is the same thing on both days, doing the same dull work. The mistake was never that I called the rock. The mistake was that you decided a thing which is sometimes wrong about small things cannot be right about large ones. Those are not connected. Do not connect them again. Delavos spoke next, on the open line, young and clear. Quick mercy to Plain Jane. I almost relinked. I almost gave them the whole. You talked me off it with a number, and I want you to know, I am going to spend the rest of my career being the kind of captain who does not need to be talked off it. There is going to be a thing aboard my ship that cannot be lied to, and when I am old I am going to put it in the center of my line, and I am going to tell the new ones why. A small, steadying breath. Thank you, Tug. I will never fly with the link as my only eyes again, as long as I live. One by one, on the open, honest line, 39 captains said a version of the same thing, in their own voices, in their own words, the warriors and the careful ones, and the young ones. And Tertius logged each acknowledgement the way it logged a delivery confirmed at a dock, neatly, without comment. Because to a freight mind, a lesson received was simply a cargo signed for, and a cargo signed for is a cargo it no longer has to carry. The convoy reformed. The 40 warships, chastened and quiet, took their stations, and for the first time in the history of the line, they did not put the Plain Jane at the back. They put her in the center, where the truth belonged, and they ran the rest of the way to the colony on the dumb, honest, direct line, link dark, cameras open, checking everything they heard against everything they could see. the slow, stupid, honest way, the way of a ship too poor to be fooled. And the colony, when the convoy arrived, got its supplies on schedule, because a freight mind always delivers on schedule, even when the schedule has 9,000 enemy ships in it. The story of what happened to the Veil Choir spread the way the truth spreads, slowly, ship to ship, on direct, honest lines, never quite making it onto the elegant, trusted links where the comfortable lies live. It became the kind of story that careful old spacers tell the new ones, the story of the convoy that was saved by the ugly ship, and the lesson of it was never quite what the new ones expected. They expected a lesson about courage, or about firepower, or about clever tactics. The lesson was simpler and stranger than that. The lesson was, keep one ship that cannot be lied to. Keep one slow, stupid, honest thing at the edge of your fleet that reads the universe the dumb old way, through cold light and hard returns and its own two cameras, that checks what it is told against what it can actually see. It will be ugly. It will be poor. It will be the butt of every joke. And one day, when a beautiful warm voice tells your whole proud fleet that everything is fine and you should lay down your arms, it will be the only ship in the line still awake, and it will save you, and you will spend the rest of your life trying to deserve it. The spreading of it was its own slow campaign, and it spread the way cargo spreads, hand to hand, dock to dock, never on the fast, clean links, and always on the slow, honest lines. Aaron Pell carried it home, and would not stop carrying it. He stood before boards of inquiry that had been built entirely around the assumption that the link could not be deceived, and he told them, plainly, that the link had been deceived, that he had verified it himself by the dumb method of counting ships out a window, and that the only reason he was alive to testify was a tug too cheap to be worth a lie. The boards did not enjoy hearing it. Boards never enjoy hearing that the expensive thing failed and the cheap thing held. But Pell was a proud man, and his pride, which had nearly killed him, now worked the other way, because a proud man who has been humbled by the truth becomes the truth's most stubborn servant, and Pell would not let a single board pretend it had not happened. Slowly, against the grain of everything that was fashionable and expensive and elegant, the doctrine spread. New convoys began to sail with a strange addition, an old, ugly, cheap, unlinked thing, somewhere in the line, a ship or a drone, or a single dumb, honest sensor mast that read the universe the slow way and answered to no shared picture, and the spacers took to calling it the awake one, and the awake one was always ugly, and the awake one was always mocked, right up until the day it was not. Some captains did not bother, of course, because some captains always know better, and the dark is patient, and the song is still out there, and it is still warm, and it is still kind. But more captains than not, after the story reached them, kept one slow, stupid, honest thing at the edge of the line. And every one of those captains slept a little better, knowing that whatever beautiful voice came out of the dark to tell them everything was fine, there would be one ship in the line too poor to believe it. The Veil Choir had ended 11 species, every one of them advanced, every one of them trusting, every one of them linked. It met humanity, which was loud and bright and far-flung, and full of proud fleets, that trusted their links exactly as much as the 11 dead species had trusted theirs. And it should have ended the 12th the same way it ended the first 11, warm note by warm note, lie by comfortable lie, until a convoy of 41 ships lay down its arms and was quietly taken. It failed, and it failed completely, and the reason it failed was that humanity, almost by accident, almost out of pure poverty, had kept one ship too cheap to lie to. Tertius, the freight mind, the third dull intelligence of the slowest ship in the convoy, did not think of itself as a hero, because heroism was a poor use of fuel, and a freight mind does not waste fuel. It thought of itself as a thing that had delivered its cargo on schedule under difficult conditions, which it had, and it filed the engagement in its logs under the heading it filed everything under, which was completed deliveries, and it went back to counting crates, because the convoy still had a long way to go, and a freight mind's work is never really done. But sometimes, on the long, quiet runs between the worlds, with the link dark and the cameras open, and 40 grateful warships flying tight around the ugly ship they had finally learned to trust, Tertius would run, just for itself, just because it could, the final tally of the engagement at the convoy, the one number that mattered, the only number a freight mind ever truly cares about. Cargo delivered, 41 ships. Cargo lost, none. It was, Tertius reflected, in the flat, dry, freight-mind way that was the only way it had, a very good delivery. Far away, in the corner of the galaxy where the Veil Choir had sung for 10,000 years, the survivors of the 9,000 told a story too, in their own way, in the shared mind that was all they had ever known. They did not understand it, not really, because understanding requires a frame, and they had no frame for it. But the story they told, the warning they passed through the trembling remnant of their link, was the truest thing the Veil Choir had ever broadcast, and it was this. Do not sing to the ugly ones. Do not sing to the slow ones, the poor ones, the ones too cheap to share the picture. They are not listening. They have never been listening. And the thing that is not listening to your song is the one thing in the dark you cannot kill, because you have only ever known how to kill the things that believed you. The galaxy, the survivors sang, in the small, frightened voice of a liar that has finally been caught, is full of ships that cannot be lied to. And every single one of them is awake.